Welcome to World Missions University's Spiritual Ministry, Ministry 303, Lesson 10, Contradictory Terms. Note the objectives for this lesson. When you finish, you should be able to describe alternate gifts not found in our three primary texts. It bears mentioning again that we understand the usage of these terms as they appear in Scripture. We first use the word faith and the several ways Scripture uses this term. There is not one kind of faith, there are several. Faith always has to have an object to have faith in. The object changes depending on the context of the Scripture itself. There are several terms that appear twice in our three main Scripture references of Romans 12, Ephesians 4, and 1 Corinthians 12. And one that appears in all three. I've included a chart that will help you track the scripture locations of each of these gifts. For example, the gift of prophecy occurs in all three references, but has three different meanings based on the context of the scripture and the other gifts that are located around it. Teaching appears in Romans and Ephesians. The reference in Romans is a gift for teaching. In Ephesians, it is the office or the title of teacher. All the other gifts are unique to each book, Romans, Ephesians, and 1 Corinthians. Tongues appears in 1 Corinthians as a peculiar gift, but should not be confused with the initial manifestation of the Spirit. It is important that you recognize which one is being spoken of when they are mentioned in other places in Scripture. Healing appears also in 1 Corinthians as a peculiar gift, but should not be confused with the other two avenues of healing mentioned in other places in Scripture. Looking at these three Scripture references, we count 19 unique gifts, not 9 as is popular opinion. Now we're going to look at some more that appear individually in Scripture. The first one we might consider, and I say might because it is not so clear that this is a spiritual gift or not, is celibacy, or to remain unmarried. It is first hinted at by Jesus when he is speaking about divorce in Matthew 19:10 through 12. The disciples said to him, "If this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry." Jesus replied, "Not everyone can accept this word, but only to those whom it has been given. For some are eunuchs because they were born that way. Others were made that way by men, and others have renounced marriage because of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it." Some interpret Paul's teaching to the Corinthian church as an endorsement of this as a gift. He uses the word gift in the same context as speaking of being unmarried in 1 Corinthians 7 through 8. "I wish that all men were as I am, but each man has his own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. Now to the unmarried and the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I am." I know of several great men of God who have never married, but Paul explains that this kind of life is not for everybody. You have to have a gift for it. If you want to see this as a particular spiritual gift, that's number 20. The context of these next two gifts comes from 1 Corinthians 13. Some see in verse 3 the gift of voluntary poverty and voluntary martyrdom. Paul begins describing tongues in the first verse, prophecy, knowledge, and faith in the second verse, Along comes the third verse. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Paul is talking about the value of love in the context of several well-documented spiritual gifts. Then mentions giving all you possess to the poor and surrendering your body to the flames. Some interpret this as particular spiritual gifts. First, giving is clearly lined out in Romans, as we've already studied. It may be he is referring to this gift taken to extremes, as he does in the first two verses. I believe he is using another extreme of giving your body to the flames, not to line out a separate gift, but symbolic language describing what he has mentioned later when arguing for the resurrection, saying that he, of all people, dies every day. Jesus urges us to deny ourselves and to take up our own cross. If, however, you want to see these as particular spiritual gifts, that's Numbers 21 and 22. This next gift is the first one written outside of Paul's teaching. It appears in 1 Peter 4, 9 through 10. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Again, we see the word hospitality in the context of the word gift, that you would minister to one another. And again, we could be looking at the gift of giving or service in alternate terminology. If, however, you want to see this as a particular spiritual gift, that's number 23. C. Peter Wagner was an American missionary, author, and teacher. He wrote a book entitled Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, where he defined not 23 gifts, but rather 27 gifts. He is not apostolic, but he is Pentecostal. We find his work fairly comprehensive, especially when it comes to helping a Christian narrow their focus and clarify how God has gifted them to work in the kingdom. Your next assignment will be to fill out a modified version of his questionnaire that might help you understand spiritual gifts and your own role in the kingdom.